I remember the exact moment I stopped believing in the safety of my own home. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a screaming match. It was the sound of water hitting the tile floor and a shadow moving behind the frosted glass of my shower door. It was the smell of his cologne mixing with the steam, a scent I'd known for years, a scent I associated with grilled burgers and loud laughter, suddenly thick and suffocating in the humid air of my own bathroom. I had soap in my eyes, my hair dripping down my back, and I felt a cold draft from the door I was sure I'd locked. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I thought the exhaustion from my double shift had finally cracked something loose in my brain. But then I heard him breathe, a sharp, ragged inhale that was unmistakably human, and my entire body went rigid under the hot spray. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The air got stuck somewhere between my chest and my throat, and I just stood there, a statue under the water, praying that if I didn't move, the nightmare would dissolve. This was supposed to be my sanctuary. My house on Maple Street, a fixer-upper I'd bought with the settlement money from my divorce, was the one thing I had built from the ground up, just for myself. It was a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a quiet suburb outside of Austin, with a porch swing that creaked in the wind, and a kitchen where I'd learned to bake bread just to feel something other than the loneliness that had become my constant companion since Mark left. I had poured my soul into those walls, painting them warm, neutral colors, planting roses in the front yard that I talked to when I watered them in the early mornings. It was my fortress, my proof that I could be whole on my own, and I had let him in. I had opened the door to my sanctuary and invited him to rest his weary head, because that's what you do for family, right? That's what you do for a man who is supposed to be your son. Marcus. Mark's son from his first marriage. He'd always been a complicated part of my life, a reminder of a past I wasn't a part of, but I loved him fiercely from the moment I married his father. I met him when he was a sullen 14-year-old who had just lost his mother to cancer. He wore nothing but black hoodies and had a chip on his shoulder the size of Texas. I knew I wasn't his real mom, and I never tried to be. I just tried to be a safe place. I made him dinner when his dad was working late. I helped him with his biology homework, even though I barely remembered mitosis from my own high school days. I drove him to his guitar lessons and sat in the parking lot reading, listening to him play through the thin walls of the music shop. When he got his heart broken for the first time by a girl named Chloe, he came to me, not Mark, and sat on my kitchen floor crying while I rubbed his back and told him that the ache was proof that it was real. He called me Sarah, not Mom, but I was okay with that. It felt earned. But then Mark and I fell apart. It was a slow, cancerous disintegration. The death of his first wife had left a scar that I could never fully heal, no matter how much I gave. He started drinking more, staying out later, and eventually he left me for his secretary, a woman named Brenda who wore too much perfume and laughed at all his bad jokes. The divorce was brutal. It stripped away the pretense of our marriage and laid bare just how much I had been fighting alone. Marcus was in college by then, at UT Austin, and I was terrified he would hate me, that he would side with his dad. But he didn't. He was furious at his father, not for leaving me but for being a cliché. He told me I was the only stable thing he'd ever had, and that day I realized I hadn't just married into a family, I had built one, even if it was just for me and him. When he called me a few months ago, his voice was thick with defeat. He was in his final year, and his life had imploded. His girlfriend, Jess, had cheated on him with one of his fraternity brothers. His apartment had a black mold problem, and the landlord was refusing to fix it. He was behind on his tuition, and his car had broken down on I-35. He sounded like that 14-year-old boy again, lost and scared. He asked if he could crash on my couch for a few weeks, just to get his head straight, to save up some money and figure out his next steps. I didn't hesitate. I said yes immediately. For as long as you need, honey, I told him. This is your home, too. The first few weeks were honestly wonderful. It was like having a piece of my family back. The house felt alive again. I'd come home from my job as a dental hygienist, and I'd hear his guitar strumming from the living room. The smell of his cooking, he'd gotten really good at making pasta, filled the halls. We'd watch the Texas Longhorns games together on Saturdays, yelling at the TV and eating way too much queso. It was the kind of domestic bliss I had deeply missed. We were a little team again, He called me a couple of times a week, and he'd started to call me Mom, which always made my heart do a little flip. He was getting back on his feet, working at a record store downtown, and he'd just started dating a new girl named Leela, a sweet art student with bright pink hair. I trusted him. God, I trusted him so completely it makes me feel like a fool now. I'd leave my purse on the kitchen counter. I'd leave my laptop open. I didn't think twice about it because he was my stepson. He was my kid, and in my mind, that gave him a key to the whole kingdom. The Saturday of the incident was a blur. I had just worked a 12-hour shift at the dental clinic because two of our hygienists were out with the flu. My back was aching, my feet were throbbing, and the lingering smell of fluoride and latex gloves was stuck in my nose. I was desperately craving a hot shower and my bed. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Marcus's beat-up Honda Civic was gone. That was normal for a Saturday night. He was out with Leela, probably at some dive bar or catching a movie. The house was dark when I came in, save for the orange glow of the porch light I always left on for him. I kicked off my heels and felt the wave of relief wash over me. I was alone, finally, peace and quiet. I poured myself a glass of wine and headed to the bathroom, stripping off my scrubs and tossing them in the hamper. I turned on the water, letting it get scalding hot, and stepped into the steam. The feeling of the water pounding on my shoulders was pure ecstasy. I closed my eyes and just stood there, trying to let the stress of the day melt away. I was thinking about what to make for brunch on Sunday. I was thinking about the new hydrangeas I wanted to plant. I was thinking about how happy I was that Marcus was doing so well. I was thinking about anything but the future. I washed my hair, the coconut-scented shampoo filling the small space. I was singing along softly to a Taylor Swift song that was playing on my phone on the sink counter. Then I heard the floorboard creak. It was subtle, but my house is old. It has its own language of groans and clicks. It wasn't the sound of the house settling. It was the sound of weight shifting. I froze, my hands covered in suds. I was sure I had locked the front door. I was sure I had locked the bathroom door. My mind raced. A serial killer, a crazy ex-boyfriend, a burglar. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I wiped the soap from my eyes and peered through the frosted glass, my breath catching in my throat. I could see a silhouette. A tall, broad-shouldered silhouette. Panic surged through me. I reached blindly for a towel, any towel, to cover myself, but I was frozen in a state of sheer terror. The figure moved closer to the shower door. My hand was on the shower handle, ready to yank it open and fight for my life when I heard his voice. "It's just me, Sarah." It was Marcus. My first instinct was crushing relief. He was home early. He was probably just looking for his phone charger, which he kept plugged in by the sink. I let out a shaky breath. "Jesus, Marcus, you scared the hell out of me." I called out, my voice quivering. "What are you doing home so early?" There was a long pause. I could still see his outline just standing there, not moving. He started, his voice sounding strange, almost hoarse. "Leela canceled on me. I saw your car and I just wanted to say hi." I laughed nervously, my adrenaline still spiking. "Hi, honey, you almost gave me a heart attack. I'll be out in a minute. Just let me get cleaned up." But he didn't leave. I waited for the sound of his footsteps retreating down the hall. They never came. A cold dread trickled down my spine, a feeling that had nothing to do with the cooling water. He was still standing there. I could see his hand reach out, and I heard the soft click of the bathroom door lock latching shut. A sound I had locked myself. But now he had locked us both in. My blood ran cold. The steam suddenly felt oppressive, suffocating. My mind screamed at me that this wasn't right. This wasn't just a mother and her son. The proximity, the context, the shower running, my vulnerability, it was all wrong. "Marcus," I said, my voice stern now, trying to inject a maternal authority that I no longer felt. "I need you to get out of the bathroom. This isn't funny." "Sarah," he said again, my name rolling off his tongue in a way it never had before. It wasn't the name of his stepmom. It was something else. Something heavy with a meaning I was terrified to decipher. "I need to tell you something. I need to tell you what I saw." The silence that followed his words was thicker than the steam, and it pressed against my skin like a physical weight. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My back was pressed against the cold tile of the shower wall, and the water was starting to run cold, sending a chill across my shoulders that had nothing to do with the temperature. I was acutely aware of every inch of my naked body, of the vulnerability that came with being caught off guard in the most intimate moment of my daily routine. My mind was racing, desperately trying to find a rational explanation for what was happening. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was high on something. Maybe he had hit his head and wasn't thinking clearly. But even as I crafted these excuses for him, a darker part of my brain knew the truth. There was no excuse for this. There was no justification for locking yourself in a bathroom with a woman who was essentially your mother while she was showering. "Marcus, you need to leave right now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to project a calm that I absolutely did not feel. "Whatever you think you need to tell me, it can wait. I'm naked in the shower. This is completely inappropriate." I heard him let out a low, shaky breath. "I know," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like pain. "I know this is crazy. I know you're going to hate me. But I've been carrying this for weeks, Sarah. I can't keep it inside anymore. It's eating me alive." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I reached for the shower handle, turning off the water. The sudden silence was deafening. I grabbed a towel from the rack beside the shower and wrapped it around myself, my hands trembling so violently that I almost dropped it. I stood there for a long moment, gathering every ounce of courage I possessed, and then I pulled the shower door open. He was standing right there, so close I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. He was wearing the same faded jeans and black t-shirt he'd had on at breakfast. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it repeatedly, and his face was a mask of tortured emotion, a mix of desperation and fear and something else, something that made my stomach turn. He was looking at me with an intensity that I had never seen before, and it wasn't the look of a son looking at his mother. It was the look of a man looking at a woman he wanted. "Please," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Please just listen to me. I swear I'm not crazy." "Marcus," I said, my voice sharp as a blade. "Step back right now. I'm going to go to my room, I'm going to put clothes on, and then we're going to talk about how you're going to pack your things and leave my house tonight." Something flickered in his eyes. Hurt, anger, I couldn't tell, but he didn't move. He just stood there, blocking the door, his body a wall between me and the hallway. "I saw you," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sent chills down my spine. "A few weeks ago, I came home early from work. I thought you were at your appointment. I walked through the kitchen and I saw your phone on the counter. It was open. It was a text from Mark." The mention of my ex-husband's name hit me like a slap. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. "I haven't spoken to Mark in months, you know that." He shook his head slowly. "I saw the texts, Sarah. I saw the pictures. I saw everything." A cold wave of confusion washed over me. What pictures? What texts? I hadn't communicated with Mark since the divorce was finalized. He had made it abundantly clear that he was moving on with Brenda, and I had made it my mission to move on too. I had deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and burned every physical reminder of our marriage in a bonfire in my backyard, a symbolic act of liberation that my therapist had recommended. I had no idea what Marcus was talking about. "I don't know what you think you saw," I said slowly, carefully. "But I promise you, there's nothing between your father and me. He left me. He chose someone else. There's no secret relationship. There's no hidden romance. Whatever you found on my phone, it wasn't from him." Marcus let out a harsh, bitter laugh. "You don't even know, do you?" He ran a hand over his face, and I could see that his hand was shaking. "You have no idea what he's been doing behind your back, what he's still doing." "Marcus, you're not making any sense," I said, my voice rising with frustration. "Please just let me get dressed. Whatever this is, we can talk about it in the living room like two rational human beings. Not here, not like this." He finally stepped back, just a foot, just enough for me to squeeze past him. I pushed past him, my bare feet slapping against the cold tile floor, and I didn't stop until I reached my bedroom door. I slammed it shut and twisted the lock, my fingers clumsy and shaking. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving, and I could feel the tears starting to prick at my eyes. What the hell was happening? My stepson, the boy I had raised like my own, had just locked himself in the bathroom with me while I was naked. He was accusing me of something I had no knowledge of, and he was looking at me like I was a stranger. I pulled on the first clothes I could find, a pair of yoga pants and an old UT sweatshirt, and I stood in the middle of my bedroom trying to collect myself. I took deep breaths, counting to 10, trying to force my heart rate to slow down. I looked at myself in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes wide with shock. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. This wasn't how my life was supposed to be. I was supposed to be helping him. I was supposed to be his safe place. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss I couldn't even see the bottom of. When I opened the door, he was sitting on the edge of my bed. He had moved from the bathroom to my bedroom, which was somehow even worse. He was sitting on the same bed where I slept every night, where I had dreamed of finding love again, where I had cried myself to sleep after Mark left. He was looking at his hands, and when he heard me come in, he looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed like he had been crying. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to scare you. I just didn't know how else to say it. Every time I tried to bring it up, you would change the subject. You'd say you were too tired, or you had to work early, or you had a headache. I've been trying to tell you the truth for weeks, and you keep shutting me down." "Truth about what?" I said, my voice flat. I crossed my arms over my chest, a defensive gesture that I hoped made me look stronger than I felt. "Marcus, you need to tell me what's going on right now. No more games, no more cryptic nonsense. Just tell me." He took a deep breath, and I could see him steel himself, like he was about to jump off a diving board. "Mark didn't leave you for Brenda," he said slowly. "At least, not entirely. He had been cheating on you for years, with multiple women. Brenda was just the one you found out about. But the real reason he left, Sarah, is because he was scared you were going to find out about the money." "What money?" I asked, my mind reeling. "What are you talking about?" He pulled out his phone, his fingers moving across the screen. He handed it to me, and I looked down at a series of bank statements. My bank statements, or rather what I had thought were my bank statements. But the numbers were wrong. There was less money than there should have been, a lot less. I had a healthy savings account, money I had been carefully building for years, money that was supposed to be my safety net. But according to these statements, the balance was a fraction of what it should be. "Your joint account," he said quietly. "The one you had with Mark, he never closed it. He never took his name off. He's been slowly siphoning money out of it for the past 2 years, ever since the divorce. Small amounts, just a few hundred here and there, enough that you wouldn't notice unless you were looking closely. He's been using it to fund his lifestyle with Brenda, and he's been paying off his gambling debts." The world tilted around me. I grabbed the edge of my dresser to steady myself. "That's not possible," I whispered. "I checked the account. I closed it. I had the bank close it." Marcus shook his head. "He had a joint credit card with you too, and he's been racking up charges, thousands of dollars. He told the bank that he was still living with you, that you were still married. They believed him. He had the statements sent to a P.O. box. You never saw any of it." I felt like I was going to be sick. All that time, all those years of working double shifts, of skipping vacations, of wearing the same clothes for years just to save a few dollars, it had all been for nothing. Mark had been stealing from me. He had been draining my life savings, the money I was going to use to retire early, the money I was planning to use to help Marcus with his student loans. And I had been completely oblivious. "Show me," I said, my voice hoarse. "Show me the proof." He pulled up more documents. Emails from the bank that had been sent to Mark's personal email, ones that I had never seen. Credit card statements with charges for dinners at expensive restaurants, for hotel rooms in Cancun, for jewelry from stores I could never afford. There was even a statement from a car dealership. He had bought Brenda a brand new SUV. With my money. I sank down onto the bed beside Marcus, my legs giving out from under me. The tears that I had been holding back finally spilled over, hot and furious. I was crying for all the years I had wasted on a man who had never loved me, for all the money I had worked so hard to earn, for the betrayal that seemed to have no end. Mark had not only broken my heart, he had also tried to break my future. "I wanted to tell you sooner," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "I found all of this when you asked me to help you file your taxes last month. You gave me access to your accounts and I saw the discrepancies. I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you would hate me for exposing your ex-husband. I thought you'd be embarrassed that you didn't notice. I don't know what I thought. I just kept waiting for the right moment." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment the fear and confusion in my chest were replaced by a deep, aching gratitude. He had found this evidence. He had brought it to me. He had been trying to protect me. But then the other part of what had happened came crashing back into my mind, and my expression must have changed because he flinched. "Why did you do that?" I asked, my voice low. "In the bathroom. Why did you lock the door?" He looked away, his jaw tight. I didn't think, he said, but I could hear the lie in his voice. I panicked. I saw you and I just had to tell you. I couldn't wait another second. But there was something else in his eyes, something that made my skin crawl. It was the same look I had seen when he was standing outside the shower. It was a look of longing, of hunger. And in that moment, I knew that the bathroom incident wasn't just about the money. It was about something far more complicated, far more dangerous. Marcus, I said, standing up and putting distance between us. I need you to leave. I need some time to process all of this. I need you to go stay with a friend tonight. He stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. Sarah, I know this is a lot, but I need you to understand. The only reason I didn't tell you sooner is because I didn't want to hurt you. I've been trying to protect you. I've been trying to take care of you the way you took care of me. Protecting me doesn't involve locking yourself in a bathroom with me while I'm showering, I said, my voice shaking. That wasn't about protection. That was something else. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't that. He walked toward me and I took another step back, my hand reaching behind me for the doorknob. Please, he said, his voice desperate. Just let me explain, there's more, there's something else you don't know. But I was already shaking my head. No, I can't do this right now, I need you to leave. He stopped, his face crumpled with a sadness that I couldn't quite understand. He looked like a little boy again, the same little boy who had sat on my kitchen floor crying over a girl who had broken his heart. But there was something else there now, something that had never been there before. Something that scared me more than anything Mark had ever done. I'll go, he said quietly. But I'll be back. And when I come back, you're going to listen to everything I have to say. Everything. He walked past me, brushing against my shoulder as he left the room. I heard his footsteps echoing down the hallway, heard the front door open and close. And then I was alone, standing in the middle of my bedroom, surrounded by the silence of a home that no longer felt safe. I walked to my window and watched him drive away, his taillights disappearing around the corner. And then I sank down onto the floor, my back against my bed, and let the sobs rack my body. I had been betrayed by my ex-husband, my money stolen, my trust shattered. And now I was terrified that something even worse was happening with my stepson. Something I couldn't name, something I didn't want to face. But I knew deep down that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his silhouette through the frosted glass. I felt the cold draft from the door he had locked behind him. I heard his voice, low and desperate, saying my name in a way that made my skin crawl. I sat on my bed with my knees pulled up to my chest, staring at the wall, replaying every interaction I'd had with Marcus over the past few weeks. Had there been signs I'd missed? Had he looked at me differently? Had his hugs lasted a second too long? I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that the shock of the financial betrayal had scrambled my brain and made me see things that weren't there. But deep down, I knew the truth. The way he had looked at me in that bathroom wasn't the look of a son protecting his mother. It was the look of a man who wanted something he had no right to want. By morning, my eyes were swollen and my head was pounding. I dragged myself to the kitchen and made a pot of coffee so strong it could have stripped paint. I sat at the table, the same table where Marcus and I had shared so many meals, and I stared at his empty chair. I thought about the evidence he had shown me, the bank statements and credit card charges. That was real. That was tangible. I could do something about that. I could call a lawyer, I could contact the bank, I could fight back against Mark and reclaim what was mine. But the other thing, the thing that had happened in the bathroom, that was a different kind of monster entirely. That was the kind of thing that could destroy a family, that could shatter the fragile sense of self I had rebuilt after my divorce. I pulled out my phone and called my sister, Claire. She lived in Dallas with her husband and 3 kids, and she was the only person in the world I trusted completely. When she answered, her voice was bright and cheery, the voice of someone who hadn't spent the night in a state of sheer terror. Hey sis, what's up? I opened my mouth to speak but nothing came out. The tears started flowing again, silent and hot. Claire, I finally managed, my voice cracking. I need you to come here. Something happened, something really bad. Within an hour, she was on the road. It was a 3-hour drive from Dallas to my little house on Maple Street, but Claire didn't hesitate. She had always been my rock, the one person who could make sense of the chaos in my life. When Mark left, she had been the one to show up with a bottle of wine and a box of tissues, to hold my hand and tell me that I was going to be okay. And now she was coming to save me again. While I waited for her, I started making calls. I called my bank and spoke to a manager, a woman named Patricia, who was horrified when I explained the situation. She put me on hold while she investigated, and when she came back, her voice was heavy with sympathy. "Mrs. Harper, I'm so sorry. It appears your ex-husband did have access to your account through a joint credit card that was never properly closed. We're going to launch an investigation immediately. We'll freeze all transactions and work with you to recover the funds." I thanked her and hung up, feeling a small measure of relief. At least that part of the nightmare was being addressed. I called my lawyer next, a no-nonsense woman named Diane who had handled my divorce. She promised to send Mark a cease and desist letter and to pursue legal action if necessary. "He can't get away with this," she said firmly. "The law is on your side, Sarah. We're going to nail him." But even as I handled the logistics, my mind kept drifting back to Marcus. Where was he? Was he okay? I had told him to leave, and he had left. But the way he had looked at me before he walked out the door, the desperation in his eyes, it haunted me. I didn't want to believe that the boy I had raised could be capable of something so twisted. I didn't want to believe that I had been so blind. Claire arrived just after noon. She burst through the front door and wrapped me in a hug so tight I thought my ribs might crack. "Tell me everything," she said, pulling back to look at my face. "Start from the beginning." I told her. I told her about Marcus's call, about his heartbreak and his troubles, about how I had invited him to stay. I told her about the weeks of companionship, the laughter, the feeling of having family again. And then I told her about last night. I told her about the bathroom, about the locked door, about the way he had looked at me. I told her about the bank statements, about Mark's betrayal, about all of it. By the time I finished, I was shaking and Claire's face was pale. "Sarah," she said slowly, "you need to change the locks. Today, I'm not kidding, if he shows up again you don't let him in, you call the police, you don't engage with him at all." I nodded, but even as I agreed I felt a pang of guilt. This was Marcus. I had loved him like my own son. How could I just shut him out? But Claire was right. The man who had stood in my bathroom wasn't the same boy I had raised. Something had changed in him, something dark and unsettling. Claire helped me contact a locksmith, and within a few hours the locks were changed. I had new keys, and so did Claire. She insisted on staying with me for a few days, and I was grateful for her presence. She cooked dinner, made me eat, and forced me to take a shower, standing guard outside the bathroom door the entire time. "You're not alone," she kept saying. "I'm not going anywhere." But the fear didn't go away. Every creak of the house, every passing car, every shadow outside the window made my heart race. I couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus was out there somewhere, waiting, watching. I thought about calling him, texting him, just to make sure he was okay, but Claire forbade it. "He lost the right to that kind of concern when he locked you in a bathroom," she said bluntly. "Focus on yourself. Focus on getting your money back. Focus on healing." I tried to focus on the practical things. I gathered all the documents Marcus had shown me, the bank statements and credit card charges, and I organized them into a folder for my lawyer. I called the police and filed a report about the financial fraud, giving them all the evidence I had. They took it seriously, assigned a detective to the case, and promised to keep me updated. It felt good to be proactive, to take control of the situation. But every time I thought I had it handled, the image of Marcus's face would flash through my mind, and I would feel that cold dread all over again. 2 days passed. I didn't hear from Marcus. I didn't see his car. Part of me hoped he had left town, gone back to his life, decided to put all of this behind him, but another part of me knew that wasn't the end. He had said he would be back, and I believed him. On the third night, Claire and I were watching a movie in the living room when my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. "Sarah, I know you changed the locks. I know you're scared, but you need to hear me out. I'm not going to hurt you. I love you. I've always loved you. Please just give me a chance to explain." It was Marcus. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I showed it to Claire, and her eyes went wide. "He's escalating," she said quietly. "This isn't just about the money anymore. He's fixated on you. We need to take this seriously." I wanted to respond. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him how much he had hurt me, to demand to know what the hell he was thinking. But Claire grabbed my wrist and stopped me. "Don't engage," she said firmly. "Any response is a reward. He wants your attention. Don't give it to him. She helped me block the number, and then she called the police again. The detective who had taken my report about the financial fraud was a man named Harris, a gruff but kind officer who had been in the force for over 20 years. When he heard about the text, he came to my house within the hour. "Ma'am, this is a serious situation," he said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. "We're dealing with two separate issues here, the fraud and the harassment. The fraud is a white-collar crime and we're working on that. But the harassment, the stalking, that's a different beast. He's showing signs of obsession. He's been watching your house, hasn't he?" I hadn't told anyone about the feeling of being watched. The prickle on the back of my neck, the shadows that seemed to move in the darkness. But I nodded, my throat tight. "He's been watching," I admitted. "I thought it was just my imagination, but now, I don't know." Detective Harris nodded slowly. "We'll increase patrols in your area. I want you to keep your doors locked at all times. Don't go outside at night. If you see anything suspicious, anything at all, you call me immediately. And if he shows up at your door, you do not open it. You call 911 and you get away from the door. You understand?" I nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and relief. Someone was taking me seriously. Someone was going to protect me. After Mark, I had learned to rely on myself. But now, with Marcus, I realized I couldn't do this alone. The rest of the week was a blur of fear and frustration. I went to work, but I couldn't focus. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him in the dental clinic lobby, waiting for me. My patients were kind, but I could tell they sensed something was wrong. My hands were steady enough to do my job, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about the boy I had raised, the one who used to come home with scraped knees and broken hearts, the one who had called me his rock. Where had that boy gone? What had happened to him? Claire stayed by my side, a fierce guardian, but even she had to go home eventually. Her kids needed her, her husband needed her. I told her I was fine, that I could handle it, but she looked at me with worry in her eyes. "You call me the second anything happens," she said, hugging me tightly. "I mean it, day or night, I'll be here in 3 hours." The day she left, I decided to be brave. I forced myself to go about my routine to reclaim my life. I went to the grocery store. I watered my roses. I sat on my porch swing and read a book, trying to pretend that everything was normal. And for a few hours, it almost worked. I almost convinced myself that the worst was behind me. But then the sun went down and the fear crept back in. I was getting ready for bed, brushing my teeth, when I heard a knock at the front door. It was soft, hesitant, almost apologetic. My heart seized in my chest. I tiptoed to the window and peered through the blinds. And there he was, Marcus, standing on my doorstep, his hands shoved in his pockets, his head bowed. He looked like a lost little boy, the same lost little boy I had tried to protect all those years ago. "Sarah," he called out, his voice muffled by the door. "I know you're in there. I saw the lights. Please, just open the door. I need to talk to you. I need to make things right." I stood frozen, my hand on the deadbolt. Every instinct told me to walk away, to call the police, to protect myself. But a smaller voice, a voice I didn't want to listen to, whispered that this was still Marcus. The boy I had loved. The boy I had tried to save. He knocked again, harder this time. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking. "I swear on my life, I just need you to understand. There's so much you don't know. About Mark, about me, about everything." My hand was shaking as I reached for the phone. I had to call Detective Harris. I had to follow through on my promise. But before I could dial, Marcus said something that made me freeze. "Sarah, I know about the baby." The phone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. My blood turned to ice. The baby, my baby, the one I had lost, the one I never told anyone about. The miscarriage I had suffered when I was married to Mark, the one that had nearly destroyed me. I had never breathed a word of it to anyone except my therapist. How could he possibly know? "I know you don't want to talk about it," Marcus continued, his voice softer now, almost tender. "I know you think you're the only one who knows, but I saw your medical records. I saw the hospital bill. I know what Mark did to you when you were pregnant. I know why you lost the baby. And I know it's the reason you stayed with him for so long, because you thought you were broken, that you couldn't have kids, that no one else would ever want you." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. I hadn't thought about that dark time in years. The pregnancy had been a surprise, a miracle I had never expected after years of trying. I had been so happy, so full of hope. And then, at 12 weeks, I had lost it. The doctor said it was a normal miscarriage, that sometimes these things just happened. but I had always wondered. I had always suspected that the stress of Mark's constant absences, his late nights, his simmering cruelty had played a part. I had never told Marcus. I had never told anyone. How could he have found out? Why would he have looked for it? Please, Sarah, Marcus said through the door, his voice barely a whisper. Please just open the door. I can explain everything. I can tell you what Mark did to you. I can tell you why I came here. It wasn't an accident. It was never an accident. My hand hovered over the deadbolt. The fear was still there, cold and sharp, but now it was mixed with something else, curiosity. Anger, a desperate need for answers. Against every rational thought in my brain, against every warning Claire and Detective Harris had given me, I felt my fingers turn the lock. The door swung open, and there he stood. The night air rushed in, cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of rain from a storm that was brewing on the horizon. Marcus stood on my doorstep, his shoulders slumped, his face etched with a weariness that made him look 10 years older than he was. He was wearing the same black t-shirt and faded jeans from the night of the bathroom incident, and his hair was disheveled, like he hadn't slept in days. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I just stared at him, trying to reconcile the man in front of me with the boy I had raised, trying to find some trace of the child who had once trusted me with his deepest secrets. But all I saw was a stranger who knew things he had no right to know. How do you know about the baby? I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. How could you possibly know that? Marcus let out a shaky breath, his eyes darting away from mine. Can I come in? He asked, his voice pleading. Please, Sarah, I promise I'll tell you everything, but I can't do this on your doorstep. It's too exposed, too dangerous. The word dangerous hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I should have slammed the door in his face. I should have called the police and had him arrested for trespassing. But the need for answers was overwhelming, a burning fire in my chest that consumed all rational thought. I stepped back, holding the door open just wide enough for him to slip through. He walked into the living room, his eyes scanning the familiar space like he was seeing it for the first time. He paused at the mantel, where a framed photo of the two of us sat, taken at his high school graduation. We were both smiling, arms around each other, the picture of a happy family. He reached out and touched the glass, his fingers tracing the outline of my face. I remember that day, he said softly. You were so proud of me. You told me you loved me like I was your own son. I meant it when I said I loved you too. But I don't think either of us knew what that meant. I crossed my arms over my chest, a protective gesture that felt pathetically inadequate. You need to start talking, Marcus. Right now, no more games. No more cryptic bullshit. Tell me how you know about my miscarriage and tell me why you've been stalking me. He turned to face me, and there was a rawness in his expression that made my breath catch. After you kicked me out, he began, I didn't know where to go. I drove around for hours just thinking, about you, about Mark, about everything. And I realized that I had been keeping secrets from you. Secrets that weren't mine to keep. Secrets that Mark told me in confidence, secrets that he made me promise I would never share with you. But I can't keep them anymore. I can't live with the weight of them. He sat down on the couch, his head in his hands. I remained standing, keeping my distance, my back to the wall. My father, he said slowly, is a monster. I've known it for a long time, but I never wanted to admit it. He's not just a cheater. He's not just a thief. He's a manipulator, a liar. He's been playing you for a fool since the day you met him. I felt a sharp pang of anger, but I bit my tongue. I wanted to hear what he had to say. Go on, I said flatly. Marcus looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. The miscarriage, he said, his voice cracking. It wasn't a natural miscarriage, Sarah. Mark caused it. He pushed you down the stairs. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backward, my hand flying to my mouth. The memory came flooding back, a memory I had buried so deep I had almost convinced myself it was a dream. I had been 6 weeks pregnant, glowing with happiness. Mark had come home late, drunk and belligerent. I had confronted him about his affair with Brenda, the one I had just discovered. He had flown into a rage, screaming at me, calling me names. I had tried to walk away, to go upstairs and escape his cruelty. And then I had felt his hand on my back. A hard shove. I had tumbled down the stairs, my body bouncing against the wooden steps, the pain exploding in my abdomen. When I woke up in the hospital, Mark was sitting beside me, holding my hand, his face a mask of concern. You fell, he had said. You tripped on the carpet, it was an accident. I had believed him. I had wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too horrible to contemplate. The man I loved, the father of my unborn child, had deliberately murdered my baby. I had spent years blaming myself, convinced that my own clumsiness had cost me my child. But it had been him. It had always been him. "Why are you telling me this now?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me years ago?" Marcus stood up and walked toward me, his hands outstretched. I flinched and he stopped, a pained expression crossing his face. "I didn't know until recently," he said. "My mother, my biological mother, she knew. She found out before she died. She tried to expose him, but he threatened her. He told her that if she ever said a word, he would take me away from her. He would make sure she never saw me again, so she stayed silent. She took her secret to the grave." I felt tears streaming down my face, hot and bitter. "And you?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You knew all this and you still came to my house, you still let me take care of you, you still let me love you like you were my own son." Marcus's face crumpled. "I didn't know how to tell you," he said. "I was terrified. I thought you would hate me. I thought you would blame me for keeping it from you. And I was right, wasn't I? You do hate me now." "No, Marcus," I said, my voice sharp. "I don't hate you. I'm terrified of you. There's a difference. You locked yourself in a bathroom with me while I was showering. You've been watching my house. You've been sending me texts that sound like a stalker. You're not the same person I raised. You've become something I don't recognize." He recoiled like I had slapped him. "I know," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I know I messed up. I know I scared you, but you have to understand, Sarah. Finding out the truth about my father broke something inside me. I couldn't look at you without thinking about what he did to you. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times I had defended him, all the times I had made excuses for him. I felt so guilty, so dirty. And the only thing that made me feel better was being near you, protecting you, making sure he couldn't hurt you again." "Protecting me?" I said, my voice incredulous. "You think what you did was protecting me?" "I know it was wrong," he said, his voice rising. "I know I crossed a line, but I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to save you. There's more, Sarah, there's so much more. Mark isn't just stealing your money. He's been planning something bigger. He's been talking to people you don't know, people who want to hurt you." I stared at him, my mind reeling. "What are you talking about?" Marcus took a deep breath, his hands shaking. "Mark owes a lot of money, Sarah. Gambling debts, business debts, loans from people who aren't exactly the kind of people you want to owe money to. He's been using your money to pay them off, but it's not enough. He's desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. He's been talking about coming after you, taking everything you have left. Maybe even," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Maybe even what?" I demanded, my heart pounding. "Maybe even killing me." Marcus didn't answer. He just looked at me, his eyes filled with a terror that mirrored my own. I sank down onto the armchair, my legs unable to support me any longer. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the secrets, the lies, it was all too much. I had spent years trying to rebuild my life after Mark, and now I was learning that the foundation I had built was sand. My ex-husband had killed my baby. He had stolen my money. And now he was threatening my life. And my stepson, the boy I had raised like my own, had been hiding the truth from me, his intentions twisted by guilt and obsession. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Why did you have to do it this way? Why did you have to terrify me?" Marcus fell to his knees in front of me, his hands reaching for mine. I let him take them, too exhausted to resist. "Because I was scared," he said, his voice cracking. "I was scared that if I told you the truth, you would run, you would disappear, you would go somewhere where I couldn't protect you, and I couldn't let that happen. I love you, Sarah. Not like a son loves his mother, I love you like a man loves a woman, and I know that's wrong, I know it's messed up, but I can't help it. You're the only good thing in my life, the only person who ever made me feel safe, and I would do anything to keep you safe." "Anything?" I pulled my hands away, my heart breaking into a million pieces. "Marcus," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "you're my stepson, you're the closest thing I have to a child. What you're feeling, it's not love, it's confusion, it's grief, it's guilt, but it's not love, it can never be love." He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Then what am I supposed to do?" he asked. "How am I supposed to live with all of this?" I reached out and placed my hand on his cheek, a gesture that was both motherly and final. "You have to let me go," I said softly. "You have to go back to your life, you have to find a therapist, get help, figure out who you are without all this pain and guilt and anger, and you have to stay away from me." He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "I can't," he said. "I can't just walk away." "You have to," I said, my voice firm. "For both of us." I helped him to his feet and I walked him to the door. He paused on the threshold, looking back at me with a sadness that broke my heart. "I'm sorry," he said. "For everything, for what I did, for what I didn't tell you, for all of it." I nodded, unable to speak. And then he was gone, disappearing into the darkness, leaving me alone with the ruins of everything I had believed. I closed the door and leaned against it, my body shaking with sobs. I had lost so much: my marriage, my baby, my money, and now the boy I had loved like my own son. But as I stood there in the silence, I realized that I had also found something. I had found the truth, and with the truth I could finally start to heal. The next morning I called my lawyer. I gave her everything Marcus had told me, the whole sordid story of Mark's crimes. She promised to take it to the police to fight for justice. I called Claire and I told her everything. She was on the road within the hour, and I started to make a plan. I was going to sell the house on Maple Street. I was going to move somewhere new, somewhere where I could start over. I was going to reclaim my life. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be court dates and therapy sessions and sleepless nights. There would be moments when the pain felt unbearable, but I was strong. I had survived Mark. I had survived Marcus, and I would survive this too. Months later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a tiny place in a different city, with new neighbors and new streets and no memories of what had happened. I had a new job, a new routine, and a new sense of purpose. The money Mark had stolen was slowly being recovered, court order by court order, and I had finally started to forgive myself. I still thought about Marcus sometimes. I wondered where he was, if he was okay, if he had found the help he needed. I hoped he had. Despite everything, I still loved him. Not the way he had wanted me to, but the way I always had, like a son. I hoped one day he would understand that, and I thought about Mark too. I thought about the man I had married, the man I had loved, the man who had destroyed so much of my life. I no longer felt angry. I just felt sad. Sad for the person he had become. Sad for the life we could have had. But I was done living in the past. I looked out the window at the city skyline, the lights twinkling in the distance. It was a new beginning, a fresh start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. I had been broken, but I had not been destroyed. I had been betrayed, but I had not been defeated. I had been hurt, but I was healing. The story of what my stepson did to me while I was showering wasn't the end of my story. It was just a chapter. A painful, heartbreaking chapter. But I had turned the page, and I was ready for whatever came next.
কার বাসরে ঘুমাও তুমি, কার নিয়ে চলো, আমায় রেখে কেন প্রিয়া গিয়াছ রে বলো। কার বাসরে ঘুমাও তুমি, কার নিয়ে চলো, আমায় রেখে কেন প্রিয়া গিয়াছ রে বলো। কার মনেতে তোমার আশা রাখো জমা করে, আমার আশা পুইরা দিয়া তুমি রইলা।